Hey guys, tonight we slip softly into a myth you've probably heard 1,000 times, but never quite like this. You're not just hearing about Achilles. You're walking beside him. You'll smell the salt of the Aegean, feel the weight of prophecy pressing down on your shoulders, and maybe even wonder what kind of person would dare to raise a child fated to die young. Spoiler, a goddess would. And she almost gets away with cheating destiny, almost. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start in the half-light of dawn, at the edge of the Aegean, where the sea is quiet and silver. The air smells of rain and olive leaves, and the world still holds a kind of innocence. But that's about to change. Somewhere beyond the cliffs, the sea goddess Thetis, half divine, half maternal chaos, is pacing. She's already furious with fate. She knows her son, Achilles, will be magnificent and short-lived, like lightning, and she's not okay with that. Thetis isn't your typical bedtime story mother. She's part of the old order, one of those shimmering immortals who helped birth the world and now looks at mortals like a tired parent looks at spilled milk. Yet she falls for Peleus, a mortal king who once wrestled her, literally wrestled, until she agreed to marry him. Greek romance, folks. It's always just a few steps shy of a wrestling match. The wedding was legendary, every god invited, except one, Eris, the goddess of discord. Because clearly, nothing bad ever happens when you snub someone named Discord. She shows up anyway, tosses in a golden apple labeled to the fairest, and the goddesses squabble. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite each want the title. The poor mortal Paris is asked to judge, and because the universe has a dark sense of humor, his choice, Aphrodite, will one day lead directly to the Trojan War. Meanwhile, Thetis gives birth to Achilles. He's all curls and lungs, with eyes like molten metal. You're there, watching her rock him under moonlight that glitters on her silver skin. She can already feel the clock ticking, prophecy whispering that her son will either live a long, dull life or die young and glorious. Most parents might choose long and dull. Thetis, she decides she can outsmart destiny. She tries everything. One legend says she hides the baby in fire each night, burning away his mortal weakness. Another says she coats him in ambrosia, divine butter of the gods. Peleus walks in on this nightly ritual, panics, because his wife is holding their child in a bonfire, and stops her. Thetis vanishes, heartbroken, leaving the baby behind. Historically speaking, Greeks loved stories that warned against resisting fate. The idea that destiny can't be dodged runs deep in their worldview, and Achilles is the perfect poster child for that fatalism. He's born into privilege and prophecy, yet he's as helpless as anyone else when it comes to time. You, standing there as the smoke curls through the palace hall, can almost feel the divine frustration in the air. The baby coos, unbothered. The mortal father sighs, already tired. Somewhere maybe, the fates are laughing into their wine. The quirky tidbit here, ancient Greek midwives supposedly used amulets engraved with tiny images of Achilles to protect babies from early death. Because even a tragic hero makes a decent lucky charm when you're desperate. As Achilles grows, he becomes the kind of child that legends are written about. He can outrun the wind, outthink tutors twice his age, and throw a spear farther than men can see. Peleus sends him to be taught by Chiron, the wise centaur, half man, half horse, full-time life coach. Chiron's cave smells of herbs, honey, and freshly ground olive paste. You can imagine Achilles sitting cross-legged, trying to look serious, while Chiron lectures about moderation and herbal ointments. Achilles pretends to listen, but he's itching to test himself, to run until the mountains blur. Historians still argue whether Chiron was meant as a symbol of lost ancient wisdom or just a way to explain how heroes got their special training. Either way, the centaur becomes Achilles' moral compass, a voice of reason that, later on, he'll mostly ignore. You walk beside them through fields where time brushes against your ankles. The centaur hums a tune older than language. Achilles throws a spear, and it vanishes into the horizon. The boy laughs. You almost forget the doom that hovers behind every heartbeat. And there's your first reality check of the night. You're watching someone grow into greatness knowing he's on borrowed time. Kind of like watching your phone battery drain at 1%, but stretched over an entire childhood. Still, Thetis watches from the waves, proud and fearful. The gods gossip, mortals tell stories. The boy's fame begins to ripple through Greece. Everyone feels it, the hum of a life destined for legend. Even as he laughs, even as he learns to heal wounds and hunt deer, there's that quiet undertow pulling him toward Troy. The air cools as the sun dips. You hear distant waves licking at the shore. Achilles, the boy who will one day shake empires, lies on his back staring up at constellations that haven't moved in millennia. Maybe he already senses something coming. Maybe he dreams of a city burning. Or maybe, just maybe, he's at peace for one last night. Because tomorrow, Thetis has one last trick up her divine sleeve. A desperate act involving a dark river and a dip that will echo through history. You wake the next morning to the hush of waves and the distant cry of gulls. Achilles stands at the water's edge, his golden hair tangled in the sea breeze. And Thetis, his mother, the ever-determined goddess, emerges from the surf like a silver mirage. She doesn't smile. She never really does. Not anymore. Her son is growing too quickly, and fate, that relentless bureaucrat, doesn't take bribes or extensions. She studies him barefoot, unscarred, still blissfully human. He laughs as foam tickles his toes, and something inside her tightens. You know that feeling, wanting to protect someone so fiercely that logic starts to melt around the edges. That's Thetis tonight. She's tired of playing mortal rules. She's going to do something extraordinary. You follow her as she cradles Achilles and steps into the dark, whispering current of the river Styx. The air thickens. The water hisses like it's alive. This isn't some quaint bedtime river. It's the mythic boundary between the living and the dead, a place so dangerous that even gods don't dip their fingers in casually. And yet here's Thetis, holding her baby over it like she's dipping a biscuit into tea. Except instead of milk, it's liquid destiny. She lowers him slowly, murmuring ancient words you can't quite catch. The surface glows faintly around his tiny body, coating his skin in a shimmer that seems to harden, like invisible armor. Then it happens, the detail that will ruin everything later. She holds him by the heel. Just that tiny patch of skin never touches the water. Maybe she doesn't notice. Maybe she thinks it doesn't matter. But the universe notices, and it smiles that sly, knowing smile it always wears when mortals, or immortals, try to beat the system. When she lifts him back into her arms, he doesn't cry. His skin glows faintly, perfect and whole. Thetis exhales. Safe, she whispers. You can almost believe her. Almost. A mainstream historical fact slips quietly into your ear here. Ancient Greeks genuinely believed rivers had divine power. The Styx, in particular, was said to dissolve mortal flesh and even kill gods who broke oaths sworn upon it. That's why this scene carried so much symbolic terror. Thetis is literally risking her child's life to save it. She carries Achilles home, wraps him in linen, and pretends the night never happened. Peleus, his mortal father, suspects something but doesn't ask. Husbands of goddesses have learned, when she's glowing faintly and refuses eye contact, it's best to just keep eating your olives. Years drift by. Achilles grows stronger, faster, more radiant. He can run through fields without tiring, leap walls like a cat, and never seems to bruise. You walk beside him through the palace gardens, watching him wrestle servants twice his size for sport. He laughs easily, unaware that his mother's desperate magic has already sealed his legend. But Thetis isn't done worrying. She hears whispers, prophecies of a great war brewing in the east, of a city named Troy, and a conflict that will draw every hero like a moth to flame. And she knows her son's name will be on that list. So she hatches another plan. In the middle of a lazy afternoon, when the sun bakes the marble and cicadas drone, Thetis spirits him away. She disguises him in flowing robes, hides him among the daughters of King Lycomedes on the island of Skyros, and gives him a new name. You can picture the scene. Achilles, tall and awkward, adjusting his silk veil while trying not to look like someone who could snap a spear in half. This part always makes you smile. the greatest warrior of Greece, pretending to be a princess. The other girls giggle and teach him how to braid hair. He's hopeless at it, of course. You can almost hear his thoughts. This is what being safe feels like. The fringe tidbit: archaeologists once found small terracotta figurines on Skyros that some scholars think might represent this cross-dressing Achilles phase. Others argue they're just generic dancers, but still, it's fun to imagine ancient toy makers immortalizing the world's most reluctant debutante. Historians still argue whether this hole, hidden among maidens' story, was ever part of the original myth, or a later addition meant to inject irony. But honestly, the image is too good to skip. Even myths need a touch of comedy relief. You sit by a fountain in the palace courtyard, listening to the sea beyond the cliffs. Achilles, now Para, meaning the red-haired girl, tries to move gracefully, but he keeps forgetting to pitch his voice high. One of the maids eyes him suspiciously. You want to laugh, but something about the scene feels like the calm before a storm. And indeed, far across the wine-dark sea, the gods are stirring. Paris has stolen Helen, the face that will launch 1,000 ships. The Greek kings begin to gather, calling every oath-bound warrior to arms. And in some smoky council room, Odysseus, the clever one, the trickster with a grin you can't quite trust, is already plotting how to find the missing son of Thetis. Thetis feels it too. You see her pacing the cliffs again, the same look she wore when she dipped her baby in the Styx. She can't stop what's coming. She can only delay it. The horizon burns gold at sunset, and the waves crash harder, as if even the sea resents what's about to happen. For now, though, Achilles still laughs. He dances clumsily in his borrowed silks. He flirts awkwardly with Lycomede's daughters. And you, sitting there in the fading light, wonder whether he suspects, whether deep inside that unstoppable heart, he already knows this piece is borrowed time. Somewhere below, the tide whispers secrets to the shore. One day soon, Odysseus will arrive with a chest full of gifts, and a trick that will tear Achilles out of hiding and thrust him onto the path of legend. But that's for tomorrow. For tonight, the island is quiet, the moon is kind, and destiny, just for a moment, pretends to be asleep. Morning on Skyros tastes of salt and orange peel. The palace stirs with the sounds of laughter, sandals slapping marble floors, and somewhere, a harp being tuned just slightly out of key. You walk through the airy halls, where young women move, like petals in the breeze, each one painted in sunlight and perfume. Among them, one figure stands just a bit too tall, shoulders a bit too broad. That would be you. Well, technically Achilles, currently the most muscular maiden in the Aegean. Thetis' little plan is still holding, at least on the surface. Achilles answers to the name Pyrrha, meaning flame-haired. And while the disguise fools most, there's a certain stiffness in his stride that even the most patient observer would call not exactly feminine. Still, he plays along. There's something almost endearing about it. The greatest warrior of the age spending his mornings weaving garlands and his afternoons pretending not to crush wine cups accidentally. You find him in the garden, surrounded by the daughters of King Lycomedes. They're gossiping about hairstyles and dowries, while Achilles sneaks olives when no one's looking. He's trying to blend in, but every now and then, he sighs like a man who misses a good sword. The girls tease him for being dreamy. He just smiles and looks away. Meanwhile, Thetis is keeping an eye on everything from the sea. She rises in moonlight sometimes, her form half vapor, half water, murmuring spells to keep her son hidden. She knows she's on borrowed time. War is spreading across the horizon like ink in water. Heroes are being summoned, ships are being built, and omens streak through the skies. Somewhere Odysseus, ever the bloodhound of destiny, has started following whispers. There's a certain irony here that even the gods would appreciate. The boy dipped in the Styx, nearly invulnerable, now spends his days hiding behind a silk veil. Achilles might be safe, but he's not satisfied. The thing about destiny is that it doesn't knock, it breaks down the door. One evening, you watch as Achilles slips away from the others, down to the rocks where the waves crash and hiss. He stares toward the west, where the sun sinks red over the Aegean. The wind flutters the fabric around his shoulders. You can almost hear his thoughts. What's the point of living forever if you're never really alive? That's your first quiet joke of the night. Even heroes get existential crises before dinner. A mainstream historical fact fits neatly here. Greek epics like the Iliad were rooted in an oral storytelling tradition, passed down by traveling bards. So the tale of Achilles in disguise likely began as a kind of moral parable about fate, courage, and identity long before Homer put quill to scroll. The quirky tidbit: some later poets claimed Achilles actually fathered a child during his stay on Skyros, Neoptolemus, with one of Lycomedes' daughters. Imagine explaining that family tree later. Yes, I'm the son of the greatest warrior in Greece, conceived while he was pretending to be a girl. Greek mythology really never misses an opportunity for confusion. Historians still argue whether Achilles' disguise was meant to show defiance of fate, or just an overprotective mother's last bad idea. Either way, it gives the myth a strangely human edge. For all his power, Achilles is still someone trying to avoid his own future. You linger by the sea, watching the moon climb higher. The palace lights flicker like fireflies in the dark. Achilles, ever restless, throws pebbles into the surf, each one skipping fewer times than the last. The waves swallow them whole and different. He turns back toward the palace, that faint glow of unease flickering behind his eyes. Then, one morning, everything changes. The ships arrive first, sleek black hulls cutting through dawn mist. The islanders gather at the docks, whispering. The king himself steps out to greet the newcomers. Among them is a man whose eyes sparkle with mischief. Odysseus, son of Laertes, professional problem solver and part-time chaos artist. You follow him up the marble steps. He carries no weapon, just a chest filled with gifts, jewelry, perfumes, delicate silks, and, at the very bottom, a gleaming sword. You know what's coming, but Achilles doesn't. Odysseus greets the maidens with practiced charm. "Beautiful ladies," he says, "I bring treasures for noble hands." The girls squeal and crowd around. Only one of them, the tallest, with fire in his eyes, hesitates. Odysseus lays the gifts out like bait, smiling to himself. Then, as if on cue, he signals to his men outside. A trumpet blares. Warriors shout. Chaos erupts. And in that instant, Achilles, forgetting the silk, the disguise, everything, grabs the sword without thinking, spinning toward the noise in perfect battle stance. The deception shatters. The girls gasp. Odysseus laughs softly. "Well," he says, "looks like we found our missing hero." You can feel Achilles' heart drop. The secret's over. The war is waiting. Thetis rises from the sea again that night, her voice caught between love and fury. She scolds Odysseus, but he only shrugs. "The world needs him," he says simply. And maybe he's right. Achilles stands on the shore, his disguise gone, his reflection shifting in the waves. Behind him, the palace glitters with torches. Ahead, the horizon burns gold. He knows there's no going back. There's a moment, a heartbeat, where he closes his eyes, breathes deeply, and accepts it. Fate isn't something you can hide from forever. And so, you walk beside him as the tide curls around his ankles, the sea whispering goodbye. The soft laughter of Skyros fades behind you. The air smells like iron and salt. Somewhere far off, drums of war begin to thrum beneath the earth. Achilles steps into the waiting boat. The sails snap open, catching the wind. The island grows small, then vanishes completely. You lean back, the night air cool against your face. The stars tilt overhead. The adventure has officially begun, and destiny, that patient old hunter, finally has its quarry in sight. The sea hums beneath you, dark and endless. Achilles stands at the prow, the wind tugging at his cloak, the faintest trace of salt drying on his skin. You can tell he's trying to look stoic, like the kind of man who's totally fine with being dragged from a comfortable palace of singing girls straight into an apocalyptic war. But inside, he's boiling. You know that feeling, the one where someone else decides what your destiny should be, and all you can do is grit your teeth and pretend it's your idea. Behind him, Odysseus grins like a fox who just raided the henhouse. "You'll thank me later," he says. Achilles doesn't reply. He's busy glaring at the horizon as if he can make Troy vanish through sheer willpower. The ship rocks gently, creaking like an old storyteller clearing its throat. Below deck, The men whisper about omens, about how even the gods seem divided on this whole expedition. The Greeks have gathered to reclaim Helen, the world's most inconveniently beautiful woman, stolen by Paris of Troy. But everyone knows that's just the excuse. What they're really chasing is glory, immortality through fame. The same thing Achilles pretends he doesn't want, yet can't stop thinking about. You can almost see Thetis' reflection in the waves, flickering like a candle. She's not happy. Not that she ever really is. But tonight there's something sharper in her sadness. She warned her son that if he went to Troy, he would never return. But what's a mother's prophecy to a warrior's ego? Achilles leans against the rail. "You're sure this war is worth it?" he asks. Odysseus just shrugs. "Worth it? No war ever is. But stories don't remember peace." That's your first little joke tonight. Odysseus might be the only man in history who treats world-ending wars like networking opportunities. Historically speaking, Odysseus represents a very different kind of hero from Achilles. Where Achilles embodies arete, pure excellence and honor, Odysseus is all about métis, cleverness and cunning. The Greeks loved the contrast. One man fights the gods, the other outsmarts them. And somehow, both end up miserable. The fleet gathers at Aulis, hundreds of ships stretching across the harbor like teeth. You smell tar and sweat, and the faint sweetness of sacrificed incense. Kings from every corner of Greece have arrived. Agamemnon, stern and self-satisfied. Menelaus, still fuming over his missing wife. Ajax, the human siege engine. And Nestor, the eternal grandpa with an opinion on everything. You and Achilles weave through the crowd, and it's chaos. Soldiers sharpening blades, priests muttering prayers, seagulls fighting over scraps of bread. Then the wind stops. Days pass. The sails hang limp. The sea turns glassy and strange. People start muttering that Artemis, goddess of the hunt, is angry. And when a god is angry, someone usually pays the bill. The rumor spreads. Agamemnon killed one of Artemis' sacred deer. The goddess demands a sacrifice, his daughter, Iphigenia. It's a detail so bleak it almost feels like a test to see if you're still awake. But yes, this is the kind of bedtime story we're telling tonight. You stand beside Achilles as Agamemnon debates with his priests, face pale in the torchlight. No one wants to say it out loud, but everyone knows the war won't begin unless someone dies first. Achilles clenches his jaw. He hates the idea, but he's also not the one losing a child tonight. The winds return after the sacrifice, grim payment for a goddess's favor. The sails fill once more. The fleet surges forward, cutting through the sea toward Troy. The quirky tidbit here: archaeologists have found ancient Greek cursed tablets near Aulis, inscribed with prayers to Artemis asking for safe passage across the sea. Some even mention names eerily close to those in Homer's tales. It's one of those eerie overlaps between myth and possible memory. Historians still argue whether the Trojan War was ever real. Some point to ruins in western Turkey that match Troy's supposed location. Others say the whole saga is just poetic propaganda, an epic born from the need to explain a pile of burned stones. Either way, the story has outlasted every wall, every city, every grave. You feel the wind shift. The ships pick up speed. The horizon brightens with the first glimpse of Troy, a city that gleams like gold and doom at once. Achilles steps closer to the bow, eyes narrowing. "So that's it," he murmurs. "The place I'll make my name, or lose it." The men around him cheer. They see adventure, plunder, the promise of legends. You see something else, fate tightening like a noose. Night falls. The campfires flicker along the beach like scattered stars. The air smells of roasted meat and salt. Somewhere, Achilles sits alone, turning a dagger over in his hands, watching the firelight dance across the blade. He's not afraid, not exactly, but he's restless. A warrior without a battle is like a flame in a glass jar, suffocating itself. The sea whispers, "Tomorrow." And when tomorrow comes, it will bring smoke, blood, and songs that outlive every man who sings them. But for now, you just sit there beside him, letting the rhythmic waves lull your thoughts. The sails creak overhead. The gods, unseen, are already placing their bets. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear the faintest laughter from the fates. threading new lines into the tapestry, one that will soon catch fire at Troy. The dawn spills over the Aegean like honey, thick and golden. You feel the ship lurch slightly as it nears the coast, and the smell of wet sand mixes with smoke from a dozen other vessels anchoring nearby. The entire Greek fleet, 100 strong, now crowds the horizon like a swarm of restless beetles. Achilles, standing at the rail, watches it all with that uneasy mixture of pride and boredom that seems to define heroes before a fight. You stand beside him, squinting toward the distant shore where Troy waits, a mirage of towers and red walls shimmering in the morning light. The waves slap against the hull like impatient hands. "So that's it," he mutters. "That's where I'm supposed to die." He says it casually, like commenting on the weather, but his fingers tighten on the wood until his knuckles go pale. Odysseus passes by, ever the salesman. "Or live forever in song," he says, clapping Achilles on the shoulder. "Depends how you look at it." You can't help but smirk. Classic Odysseus, offering existential choices like menu options. But he's not wrong. Every man here has come chasing something: revenge, honor, a place in legend. Achilles just happens to have all three wrapped in one convenient prophecy. The fleet lands on a small island first, a staging point for the invasion. You follow the soldiers ashore. The sand sticks to your sandals. The air tastes of iron. King Agamemnon struts about, barking orders and looking very pleased with himself. Men unload supplies, polish weapons, and argue about omens. Someone's always arguing about omens. A priest claims he saw a snake devour 9 sparrows, meaning the war will last 9 years. Everyone groans. Achilles just laughs. 9 years? We'll be done in 1. You can almost see the narrator of history rolling his eyes at that line. Here's your historical fact for the section. According to later Greek historians like Herodotus and Diodorus, the real Trojan War, if it happened at all, might have been less about love and more about trade routes. Troy controlled a crucial passage for ships between the Aegean and the Black Sea. So while the poets sing about Helen's beauty, the accountants of history quietly mutter about economics. Still, in this version of the story, the one you're in, it's all about glory. You can feel it in the way men sharpen their spears, like they're tuning instruments for an opera of blood. Achilles tests his shield, checking the bronze gleam. His friend Patroclus, gentle, calm, is opposite in every way, helps fasten the straps. There's a bond there, something deep and unspoken. You sense it even now, though the story hasn't yet broken their hearts. The first target isn't Troy itself, but a smaller coastal city allied with it. A warm-up round. Achilles leads the charge. You follow him onto the beach, the wind snapping through his hair, sand spraying beneath his feet. The clash begins, swords ringing, shields shattering, men shouting their gods' names as if the louder ones will live longer. Achilles moves like a force of nature. You can barely track him, each motion a blur of muscle, precision, and something frighteningly beautiful. It's the first time you see what everyone will later call the rage of Achilles. He's smiling as he fights, but not cruelly, more like someone finally hearing the song they were born to play. The city falls by sunset. Fires bloom across the hills. Achilles stands on the ramparts, chest heaving, eyes shining with that dangerous cocktail of triumph and invincibility. Patroclus joins him, shaking his head. "You're enjoying this too much," he says. Achilles shrugs. "Isn't that the point?" Later, around the campfire, the men feast and boast. Achilles listens for a while, then drifts to the edge of the camp where the waves murmur against the shore. You sit beside him. The smell of roasting meat and wine fills the air. "They'll write songs about this," he says softly. "Maybe that's enough." You glance toward the distant glow of Troy's walls. "You really think so?" you ask. He doesn't answer, just stares at his reflection in the black water. Maybe he's wondering how many versions of himself will exist in those songs. How many lies will outlive the truth? The quirky tidbit: archaeologists found small bronze figurines near Hizarlik, believed to be ancient Troy, depicting warriors with helmets shaped exactly like those described in Homer's Iliad, which means that at least some of these poetic details, plumed crests, curved shields, weren't just artful exaggerations. They were real equipment, worn by real men who probably didn't feel half as glorious as they looked in the poems. Historians still argue whether Achilles himself was ever based on a real figure. Some suggest he might represent a composite, a memory of several great warriors whose deeds blurred together over generations of retelling. Others insist he's pure myth, a metaphor for the fragile balance between human ambition and divine meddling. But standing there beside him, you don't care which theory is true. You see a young man glowing with confidence, unaware he's already a ghost in the making. Night settles heavy over the camp. The torches flicker. The waves breathe in and out like a sleeping giant. Achilles leans back on his elbows, listening to the distant songs of victory echoing across the hills. For a moment, he almost looks peaceful. You wonder if Thetis is somewhere out there, watching him from the depths, counting each breath like it might be his last. The stars shimmer above, ancient and indifferent. The air grows cool, soft. And just before you drift off, Achilles turns to you and says, "Tomorrow, we march to Troy." You don't answer. You just let the sound of the sea carry the thought away. Because tomorrow, everything changes. Morning again, brighter, hotter, and somehow more unreal. The shore hums with activity as soldiers hammer shields, feed horses, and check the straps of chariots. The horizon glows like molten brass. You feel the anticipation in the air, a kind of shared heartbeat before the first strike. Achilles stands near his ship, greaves gleaming, his face calm but alert. Patroclus is beside him, adjusting his own armor, less polished, more practical. Around them, the Myrmidons, Achilles' elite warriors, move like a single organism, silent, efficient, terrifying. Then Agamemnon's herald calls the leaders to council. You follow. The kings gather beneath a striped canopy. Odysseus, Nestor, Menelaus, Diomedes, each a different shape of ambition. Agamemnon looks grand, gold rings flashing on every finger, his voice loud enough to drown out the surf. He announces the plan, a full assault on the Trojan beach. "We'll drive them back to their gates before sunset," he declares, pounding his staff into the sand. The men cheer, but Odysseus glances sidelong at you, expression wry. He knows better. No war worth remembering ever ends that easily. Before they march, Agamemnon insists on a sacrifice to win divine favor. A white bull is brought forward. Its eyes roll, frightened, as priests chant to Zeus and Ares. The blade flashes, and the blood spills onto the sand, dark and steaming. You smell iron again. Always iron. Achilles watches, unsmiling. "They offer blood to gods," he murmurs, "but it's ours they'll take." Then horns, drums, the war song of 1,000 throats. The army moves. The line stretches across the plain, like a living wall of bronze and dust. You march among them, sweat already trickling down your neck. Ahead, Troy rises from the plains like a dream carved from red stone. Its walls are massive, sunlit, impossible. Banners ripple from the towers. The Trojans are waiting. A line of chariots glints at the gates. Prince Hector at the front, helm crested with black horsehair, his face steady, noble, grim. He looks nothing like the villains of Greek myth. He looks tired, determined, human. Then the distance vanishes. Arrows hiss. Spears whirl. The two armies crash like colliding storms. You've never seen chaos so organized. Every sound merges, metal voices, hooves, and that strange music of destruction. Achilles drives straight into the thick of it, his spear flashing like lightning. You follow close enough to feel the wind of his strikes. He cuts through Trojan ranks as if the gods clear the path for him. You glimpse Hector's chariot turning, his eyes scanning, measuring this new threat. For a heartbeat, the two men lock gazes across the battlefield. It's not hatred, it's recognition. Two forces destined for collision. The Greeks push forward but can't break the Trojan line. The heat is unbearable. Dust sticks to your tongue. Then, above the noise, a new sound, a sharp twang. An arrow finds its mark. A soldier beside you falls. You look up and see archers on Troy's walls like blackbirds, loosing shafts into the crowd. The battle surges, breaks, reforms. Achilles leads charge after charge, unyielding. The Trojans retreat toward their gates. For a moment, it seems the Greeks will seize the beach entirely. But then Hector rallies his men and drives them back. The tide of war literally shifts, the sea pulling in red foam as bodies fall. By dusk, both sides are exhausted. The air reeks of smoke and salt. The ground is slick with mud and blood. Neither army has won. The Greeks drag their wounded back to camp. The Trojans retreat behind their unbroken walls. Later, under a bruised sky, the leaders argue in Agamemnon's tent. You stand at the edge, listening. Agamemnon blames Achilles for not pressing harder. Achilles snaps back that the king's greed ruins everything. Voices rise. Cups are thrown. Finally, the insult lands, the one that changes everything. Agamemnon demands Briseis, the captive woman awarded to Achilles as his prize of honor. Achilles' eyes go cold. You'd steal from me what I earned with blood. Agamemnon shrugs. A king takes what he will. Silence stretches, sharp as a blade. You see something shift inside Achilles. Not rage yet, but the shape of it forming. Then he speaks, his voice low, controlled. Then you'll have no blood of mine in your wars. He turns and walks out. Patroclus calls after him. He doesn't look back. The camp feels emptier without him. Men whisper that the gods themselves will punish this quarrel. Odysseus tries to mediate, but it's like throwing olive oil on fire. Days pass. The Trojans, emboldened, attack again and again. Without Achilles, the Greeks begin to falter. Their morale slips like sand through fingers. Even Agamemnon looks less golden now, his eyes haunted by the cost of his pride. At night, you see Patroclus sitting outside Achilles' tent, staring into the sea. He won't fight, he says softly. He's made up his mind. You don't answer. The waves sound like the whispering of the dead. For a bit of grounded truth, scholars now think that ancient wars like this, if they occurred, were less about massive battles and more about prolonged raids, skirmishes, and sieges. A 10-year war might really mean a decade of seasonal fighting, harvest interruptions, and attrition. But that kind of realism doesn't sing. Epic poetry needs spectacle. Still, it's fascinating how some archaeological finds line up. Burnt layers at the Hazarlik site match the time period traditionally assigned to the Trojan War, around 1200 BCE, the late Bronze Age collapse. So maybe there was a Troy, and maybe it did burn. Whether Helen or Achilles were there is another matter entirely. In the silence of the Greek camp, you hear that future echo, songs that will one day shape how people remember courage, betrayal, and loss. Achilles doesn't yet know he's part of that melody, but you do. As the moon rises, painting the sea in silver, you catch a glimpse of him, standing alone by his ship, looking toward Troy. He isn't smiling now. He looks like a man wrestling with fate and losing. And that's how it begins. Not with the clash of swords, but with silence between friends and a wound no spear can close. The next morning begins like any other, waves sighing, gulls calling, but something has shifted in the air. You can feel it. The camp, once loud with bravado, now hums with unease. Achilles stays inside his tent, polishing armor he no longer intends to wear. Outside, the Greek army readies for battle without him, the way a body tries to move after losing its heart. You walk among the soldiers, hearing fragments of worry cloaked as bravado. We'll manage without him, one insists. Another mutters, we won't. Even the Myrmidons, Achilles' own men, seem restless, pacing like leashed hounds. When the horns finally sound, it's as though the gods themselves sigh. The Greeks march, slower this time. You follow to the ridge above the battlefield and see the Trojan army already advancing, shields gleaming, horses snorting clouds of breath. Hector leads them, calm, fierce, unstoppable. The clash is immediate and brutal. The Greeks fight bravely, but you can see the difference. Without Achilles' fiery presence, their line bends. Arrows fall like metallic rain. Chariots crash, spears snap, and the cries of the wounded rise into the sky like a dark prayer. From the ships, Achilles watches. He stands at the edge of his camp, motionless, eyes fixed on the smoke curling above the battle. Patroclus stands beside him, torn between loyalty and conscience. They're dying, he says quietly. Achilles doesn't answer. The muscles in his jaw tighten. Some historians still argue whether Achilles' withdrawal and the Iliad was ever meant as literal refusal or poetic exaggeration, a symbolic sulk to highlight pride and consequence. Either way, the image endures, the greatest warrior in the world refusing to fight because his honor was bruised. Back on the field, the situation worsens. Hector drives the Greeks back toward their ships, and Agamemnon shouts himself hoarse trying to rally them. Odysseus and Diomedes fight like madmen to hold the line, but the tide has turned. You feel it in your bones. By midday, the Trojans push so close you can smell the pitch of the Greek ships burning. Panic ripples through the ranks. Men stumble into the surf, desperate to hold ground. And still Achilles watches. You can't help thinking of his mother's prophecy, that he could live a long, peaceful life if he stayed home, or a short, glorious one if he fought at Troy. Maybe this is him trying to cheat fate, you think. Maybe he's testing whether the world collapses without him. A Myrmidon runner arrives, covered in dust and blood. They need you, Lord, he pleads. Hector is breaking through. Achilles' voice is calm, almost cold. They have their king. Let him earn his glory. Patroclus looks stricken. You can't mean that. I do, Achilles says. They took my prize. Let them keep their war. He turns and walks away, leaving the runner standing in the sand. The silence afterward feels heavier than the battle itself. Hours later, the sun sinks red behind Troy's towers. The beach is littered with broken shields and twisted spears. The moans of the dying mingle with the waves. When you close your eyes, the images stay burned behind your eyelids. Fire, blood, and the flash of Hector's chariot slicing through the chaos. That night, the Greek leaders gather again in Agamemnon's tent. The air reeks of sweat, salt, and despair. Agamemnon admits, finally, that he was wrong to insult Achilles. Go to him. He orders Odysseus, Nestor, and Ajax. Offer gold, horses, anything. Tell him I will return the girl. Tell him I beg him to fight. You go with them. The night is cool, the stars sharp above the dark sea. Achilles' tent glows faintly from within, lamplight flickering. When the envoys enter, he looks up from his harp, a soft, absurdly peaceful sight, in a camp full of corpses. He plays a final note and sets the instrument aside. Odysseus speaks first, voice honeyed and persuasive. He promises riches, fame, and reconciliation. Ajax, more direct, appeals to honor. Think of your comrades dying out there, he says. They need you. For a moment, you think Achilles might relent. Then his face hardens. No treasure can heal insult. No gold can buy respect. He glances toward the sea. When a man wrongs you and still commands your obedience, what kind of life is that? Nestor, ever the peacemaker, tries to reason with him. History will judge you, he warns. Achilles smiles faintly. History already has. They leave, defeated. The surf whispers, indifferent. Later, you find Patroclus sitting by the dying fire. He isn't heartless, he says, voice low. He's lost in his own shadow. You don't argue. You just watch the horizon, where distant fires mark the edge of Troy's walls. The night hums softly, like the world holding its breath. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some older retellings, Achilles is said to have trained under the centaur Chiron, not only in combat but also in music and healing herbs. Imagine that. The same hands that could tear a man apart once learned to pluck a lyre and mix medicine. Even killers, it seems, crave gentleness somewhere deep down. As you drift near sleep, lulled by the rhythm of waves, you can almost hear that forgotten melody, the one Achilles played before war took everything. But dawn will bring new choices, and one of them will belong to Patroclus. For now, you close your eyes and feel the tremor of the sea beneath your feet, the world turning slowly toward its next heartbreak. You wake to the sound of voices, urgent, hoarse, and weary. The Greek camp has become a battlefield before dawn. The Trojans, bold from yesterday's victory, have attacked the ships directly. Flames lick at the hulls, smoke rolling across the sand like storm clouds. Patroclus bursts into Achilles' tent, breathless. They're burning the fleet, he says. Achilles doesn't look up from his armor. His face is unreadable, almost serene, like someone watching rainfall on a roof he no longer owns. They'll all die. Patroclus says, stepping closer. Diomedes, Odysseus, Ajax, they're falling back. Agamemnon's wounded. You can end this. But Achilles only says, I told them what would happen. His voice is calm, but there's an edge, resentment wrapped in fatalism. Now they'll learn the price of disrespect. You want to shout at him. You want to grab him by that shining armor and shake him. But this isn't your story to fix. Patroclus trembles with frustration. Then lend me your armor, he says. Let me go. Let them think you've returned to the fight. It might be enough to turn the tide. Achilles looks at him for a long moment. The sea murmurs outside. You're asking to wear my skin, he finally says. If you go, you don't go as yourself. You go as me. I know, Patroclus whispers. For a heartbeat, Achilles almost smiles. Then promise you'll drive them from the ships and stop. Don't go near the walls. Don't chase glory that's mine to claim. Patroclus nods, but you can see he's already broken that promise in his heart. The Myrmidons gather, ready to follow whoever bears Achilles' armor. The sun glints off bronze as Patroclus steps into the breastplate, the weight of legend settling over him. When he pulls on the helmet, hiding his face, the transformation is eerie. You feel as if Achilles himself stands there again, reborn in illusion. The Myrmidons cheer. Hope ripples through the camp, like wind over wheat. Even Odysseus lifts his head, eyes lighting with disbelief. Go, Achilles says quietly. Bring them fear. And so Patroclus goes. You follow, the sand scorching underfoot. The Trojan line, drunk with momentum, hesitates as the ghost of Achilles charges forward. The Myrmidons crash into them like thunder, their black shields flashing with sun and fury. The ruse works. For a moment, the Trojans falter. Panic spreads. The Greeks rally with a roar. The tide turns again. You almost believe this might end well. Patroclus fights like a man possessed. He hurls himself into the thickest fighting, cutting down Trojan after Trojan. You lose sight of him amid the chaos, but you can feel his presence, reckless, radiant, unstoppable. And then something shifts. Instead of pulling back, he presses forward. The Trojan gate looms ahead. Hector's chariot gleams beyond it, waiting. The gods are watching now, you can tell. The air feels electric. Back at the ships, Achilles paces. He listens to the distant shouts, the clash of metal, the smell of burning tar. For all his anger, his eyes betray fear. He won't stop, he mutters. I should have known. Historians still argue whether Achilles' armor truly had any distinctive divine craftsmanship or whether it's purely poetic invention, a symbol of the ideal warrior. Either way, in that moment, it's more than metal. It's identity itself. The battle rages. Hector, seeing the false Achilles, rallies his men. Do not fear him, he shouts. It's not the real one, it's his shadow. When they meet, you can almost feel the collision through the ground. Hector's spear splinters against Patroclus' shield, but a second blow lands true. The air goes still. The illusion breaks. The helmet falls, rolling across the dirt. The crowd gasps. Hector freezes when he sees the face beneath, not Achilles, but someone gentler, younger. He realizes too late. Patroclus, he murmurs. But the damage is done. Patroclus collapses, the life leaving him like tide from the shore. For a moment, even the gods hold their breath. You find yourself at his side, kneeling in the dust. The battle surges around you, distant and meaningless. His lips move, barely a whisper. Tell him, I tried. Then he's gone. The Greeks manage to recover the body, dragging it from the field under relentless assault. When they carry it back to camp, Achilles sees them coming. He doesn't need to ask. The way they move, slow, careful, tells him everything. He drops to his knees beside the body. The armor is gone, taken by Hector as trophy. What's left is just a boy who once believed love could tame pride. For a long time, Achilles doesn't speak. Then the sound comes, a raw, animal cry that tears through the camp. The Myrmidons fall silent. Even the sea seems to hush. The greatest warrior in Greece begins to unravel. Here's a quirky note. In later traditions, the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus becomes the subject of endless debate. Were they brothers in arms, lovers, or something in between? Ancient Greeks themselves disagreed. Plato's Symposium argues one version. Aeschylus' Lost plays another. The ambiguity is part of their immortality. You stand back as Achilles cradles his friend's body, dust mingling with tears. "You wore my armor," he whispers. "Now I'll wear your vengeance." And just like that, the sulking ends. The storm has found its center again. The night after Patroclus's death feels hollow, like the world has been scraped clean of sound. The Greek camp is quiet except for the low hiss of waves licking at burnt ship hulls. You walk among the soldiers, all of them speaking in hushed tones, as if the air itself might shatter under the wrong word. Somewhere inside his tent, Achilles does not sleep. You can hear him, not crying, something deeper. A low, rhythmic sound that sits halfway between grief and fury. It builds and builds, until even the stars seem to pull back. When he finally emerges, dawn has begun to bleed across the horizon. His face looks carved from marble, beautiful, unyielding, and frightening. His hair clings to his temples. His eyes, though, are no longer human. There's something endless in them, like he's already stepped halfway into legend. He kneels beside Patroclus's shrouded body and whispers something only the dead could understand. Then he rises. "Bring me my armor," he says. Odysseus steps forward, hesitant. "Hector took it, Achilles. It's gone." For a heartbeat, Achilles doesn't move. Then he tilts his head toward the heavens. "Then Hephaestus will make another." You don't know whether that's prayer or threat, but apparently the gods do. Because that night, when the campfire smoke curls into the sky, something shifts in the wind. You can almost smell metal and ozone, as if the forge of Olympus itself has opened. Thetis rises from the sea, her hair glowing with starlight. You blink, half convinced you're dreaming. She stands beside her son, voice soft and sorrowful. "You know this means your death," she says. Achilles doesn't look away. "He killed the better part of me already." She nods once, disappears beneath the waves, and when she returns, she carries armor so bright it silvers the night. The breastplate ripples like water. The shield seems to hold the entire world etched into its surface. Cities, beasts, constellations, even rivers that appear to move when the firelight dances across them. You realize this is no mere protection. It's prophecy hammered into bronze. The Myrmidons gather, awestruck. The armor hums faintly as Achilles lifts it. "No one touches this but me," he says, and you believe him. When he straps it on, the sound it makes is like thunder rolling across stone. Then comes the funeral. Patroclus's body lies on a raised pyre, garlanded with olive branches. The soldiers stand a circle, heads bowed. Achilles walks forward with a torch, its flame trembling in the wind. He lights the pyre himself, whispering, "You will not be forgotten." The fire roars to life. Sparks fly like souls escaping. Smoke swirls up toward the indifferent sky. A strange calm fills the camp. Even Agamemnon and Odysseus stand silent. Achilles' shadow flickers behind him, long and distorted in the firelight, stretching toward Troy. Historians still argue whether the elaborate funeral games described in Homer's Iliad were ever historically practiced or purely poetic imagination. Chariot races, wrestling, spear throwing, all prizes offered in honor of the dead. Some think these scenes preserve actual Bronze Age rituals. Others think they reflect later Greek athletic ideals projected backward. Whatever the truth, in this moment, ritual and myth blur perfectly. When the last embers fade, Achilles turns toward the sea, as if listening. "You can rest now," he murmurs to Patroclus. "But I can't." Then, louder, he calls to the Myrmidons. "Harness the chariots. Sharpen every blade. Tomorrow we end this." The men cheer, but it's not triumph they feel. It's awe tinged with fear. You feel it too. Later that night, you find Achilles standing alone on the beach. The moon turns the water to silver glass. "You know," he says quietly, without looking at you. "When I was a boy, I thought glory was gold and songs and statues. But glory's just another word for dying loudly." You don't answer. What could you possibly say to someone who already knows he's a story? A breeze stirs, carrying the smell of salt and burning wood. He exhales slowly. "Tomorrow, I'll make Troy remember him." You nod, watching his reflection ripple on the water. For a heartbeat, it looks like there are two Achilles standing side by side, the man and the myth, fused yet separate. Then he laughs once, a sound so dry it barely counts as laughter. Historians will argue about me, you know. They'll say I never existed. Maybe they'll be right. He picks up a handful of wet sand, lets it slip through his fingers. But if I didn't exist, tell me, why does it hurt this much? Somewhere behind him, the waves break, steady and eternal. You realize that this, the stillness before vengeance, is its own kind of battlefield. When dawn comes, the armor gleams like sunrise itself. The Myrmidons stand ready. The Greeks watch from a distance, murmuring that perhaps the gods have returned one of their own. Achilles mounts his chariot. His horses, immortal ones gifted by Poseidon, stamp the earth impatiently. As he grips the reins, the world seems to hold its breath. Ready? You whisper. He gives you that same calm, terrifying half-smile. No, he says, but it doesn't matter. And then, without ceremony, Achilles rides toward Troy, toward destiny, toward death, toward the song that will never end. The morning explodes with motion, shields clanging, hoofs pounding, voices rising in disbelief. You follow as Achilles leads the Myrmidons toward the battlefield, his new armor flashing like a living sun. Even from a distance, the Trojans can see it, and they hesitate, unsure if they're facing a man or something far worse. The Greeks, half broken from days of defeat, rally the moment they see him. Achilles! Someone shouts, and the name ripples down the line like a spell breaking. Spears lift. Bows draw. The fear that's been choking the army seems to evaporate. Achilles doesn't give speeches. He just raises his spear, points it at the Trojan ranks, and charges. You run with him, wind slicing through your hair, the earth trembling under thousands of feet. The clash is instant and blinding, bronze on bronze, wood splintering, dust turning the air into fire-colored haze. He moves differently now, not the proud, taunting warrior of early battles, but something stripped down, pure, merciless. Every stroke of his blade lands true. Every enemy that meets him folds. It's terrible and beautiful, like watching a storm decide where to touch ground. The Trojans try to hold, but Achilles cuts through their front lines as if fate itself guides him. You see Hector's chariot darting in the distance. He's watching, measuring, waiting for his moment. A javelin flies toward Achilles. It should have killed him. Instead, it glances off the new armor and schemes harmlessly into the dust. The sound it makes, a bright, ringing note, feels almost like laughter from the heavens. Even the gods are watching. You can sense them in the heat, in the way the light flickers. Ares is hungry for blood. Apollo seethes for Hector's sake. Thetis hovers unseen, her mother's heart breaking with each swing of her son's spear. At one point, Achilles drives his chariot straight into the Trojan River, Scamander, the Xanthus of myth, where the dead have piled so high the current can barely move. The water itself seems to recoil. He pauses long enough to wash the blood from his hands, but the river surges, angry. A voice, deep and ancient, rumbles up from beneath the foam. You've choked my waters with corpses, son of Thetis. Enough. Achilles laughs, a short, wild sound. Then wash them clean if you can. The river rises in fury, waves twisting into arms, striking at him. For a moment, it looks as though the sea itself might swallow him whole. You clutch a rock, half terrified, half entranced. Achilles fights water with fire, his spear flashing like lightning, his shout echoing across the banks. And just when it seems the flood will drag him under, the gods intervene. Hephaestus sends flame roaring down the riverbed, turning steam into a wall of smoke. The water retreats, hissing. He stands panting in the mud, armor blackened, eyes wild. You can tell he's passed the line that separates hero from myth. Historians still argue whether this river battle represents an actual flood near Hazarlik or just poetic symbolism, the moment when human rage challenges nature itself. Either way, it's hard not to feel its pulse, man defying the world that made him. When Achilles returns to the plain, the Trojans have fallen back behind their walls. He surveys the field, bodies everywhere, dust settling like ash. The Myrmidons move among the dead, silent, almost reverent. Then he spots something glinting among the corpses, Patroclus's old cloak, torn and blood-stained. He kneels, gathers it gently, presses it to his forehead. For a brief moment, all the fury drains out of him. "Almost done," he whispers. "Just one left." That one, of course, is Hector. Back in Troy, panic grips the city. Mothers wail from rooftops. Priam, the aging king, stands on the wall beside his son, trying to steady him. "Come inside," Priam pleads. "You've done enough for honor." But Hector shakes his head. "If I run, they'll call me coward. And if I fall, they'll sing." That single line, somewhere between resignation and pride, captures everything about him. You almost wish Achilles could hear it. As night approaches, both armies pull back. The Greeks celebrate, their morale reborn. Achilles doesn't join them. He sits apart, staring into the distance, the world's quiet pressing against him. Here's a curious tidbit. Some late classical writers claimed Achilles could converse with his immortal horses, Xanthus and Balius, and that they even prophesied his death. According to one version, when he asked them if he'd live through the next battle, one horse turned its head and spoke. "Short is your life, Achilles, but glorious." The other stayed silent. Some stories say Zeus struck the talking horse mute out of pity. You glance at the horses now, shifting uneasily beside his chariot. Maybe they remember. As the fires of the Greek camp flicker against the sea, Achilles speaks softly, not to you, not to anyone, but to the night itself. "Tomorrow," he says, "the world will know who I am." You lie awake long after he's gone to sharpen his spear. The waves whisper secrets to the sand, the kind only those destined to vanish ever get to hear. And somewhere beyond the dunes, Hector prays to Apollo for courage. Two men on opposite ends of prophecy, drawing closer by the hour. When sleep finally finds you, it's full of strange dreams, armor shining like stars, rivers that speak, and the sound of a name that will outlive every kingdom built from its echoes. The dawn bleeds gold over the plain, and the two armies form once again. You can feel the tension, stretched thin as a bowstring. Every soldier knows the air itself is about to split open. This is the day Achilles meets Hector. Achilles stands beside his chariot, the armor Hephaestus forged still gleaming from yesterday's firestorm. He doesn't eat, doesn't speak. He just looks east, toward Troy's high gates, where Hector is already waiting. You might expect speeches or divine trumpets, but no, there's only the quiet hum of fear. The Myrmidons watch from behind, their faces a mix of reverence and dread. Achilles' horses stamp restlessly. Even they seem to understand what's coming. He climbs into the chariot, and you follow close enough to hear his voice when he mutters, "No mercy. Not today." The Greek army surges forward, roaring. The Trojans answer from their walls. And then Hector steps out, alone. He's stripped down for speed, armor gleaming, his eyes dark with resolve. From this distance, you can't tell which one looks more godlike. Achilles' rage makes him incandescent, but Hector, there's something profoundly human about his courage, the kind that exists because fear does too. For a moment, they just stare at each other across the plain. You could swear the whole world holds its breath. Then Hector turns and runs. It's not cowardice, it's instinct. He knows Achilles is faster, stronger, practically divine. Still, he circles the walls of Troy, running with desperate elegance, while Achilles chases like a storm uncoiling. You race behind them, the wind tearing at your cloak. Around and around they go. Once, twice, 3 times, the city trembling under the pounding of their feet. Even the gods can't watch. Zeus lifts his golden scales and weighs their fates. Hector's on one side, Achilles on the other. Hector sinks, slowly, inevitably. At last, Athena intervenes. Disguised as Hector's brother, she appears before him, whispering, "Stand and fight. Together we'll bring him down." It's cruel, really. Hector believes her. He stops running, faces Achilles, and draws his sword. The world shrinks to 2 figures, one blazing, one breaking. "Let's make a pact," Hector calls out, panting. Whoever wins returns the other's body for burial. Achilles' answer is ice. There are no pacts between lions and men. The clash is instant. You flinch at the sound, metal biting air, sparks flying like fireflies. Hector strikes first, fast and clean, but Achilles dodges, countering with a blow that drives Hector back several steps. The dust swirls around them, hiding the moment of impact until it's already done. Hector falls. Achilles' spear has found the gap near his collarbone, the one place his armor doesn't cover. The body hits the earth with a dull, final sound. You wait for silence, for stillness, but Achilles doesn't stop. He kneels, yanks the spear free, then ties Hector's ankles to the back of his chariot. The Greeks cheer. The Trojans scream. And you just stand frozen, unsure whether you're witnessing victory or madness. The chariot jolts forward. Hector's body drags across the dust, bouncing lifeless, leaving a long, dark line in the sand. Around and around the walls of Troy Achilles rides, his hair wild, his face empty. The sound of the chariot wheels mingles with cries from the ramparts, Andromaches mostly. Hector's wife, watching everything from above, clutching their infant son. It's brutal, yes, but it's also ritual. Achilles isn't just killing Hector. He's trying to kill grief itself. Historians still argue whether this scene was meant to condemn Achilles' cruelty or glorify his devotion. Ancient audiences admired vengeance as a sacred duty. Modern ones tend to wince at the spectacle. But either way, the image of Hector's body tied to that chariot has never left our collective imagination. And here's a lesser-known tidbit. Some versions of the myth claim the gods made Hector's corpse indestructible. No cuts, no decay, no blood. So even as Achilles dragged him for days, the body remained unmarked, a silent reproach that no fury could erase. By evening, the Greeks returned to camp. Achilles orders the body thrown beside Patroclus' tent, where he sits to eat for the first time in days. You can see him trying to taste the food, but rage has spoiled everything. Even the bread seems to turn to ash on his tongue. That night, as the stars rise, you hear the surf murmuring against the shore. Achilles can't sleep. He walks to the firelight, still wearing armor, still burning from the inside out. I should feel peace, he says softly. But I don't. You might want to tell him that revenge never fills the hole it digs, but he wouldn't listen. None of us do, really. Instead, he lies down beside Patroclus' body, whispering to him like an old friend sharing secrets after curfew. He's gone now, he says. You can rest. Then, almost inaudibly, maybe I can too. But the gods aren't finished. They're already plotting how to bring his story full circle. The anger that made him unstoppable will soon make him mortal again. In Troy, the wailing continues all night. Priam refuses food, Andromache faints by the gate, and the fires of morning turn the sky orange. Somewhere deep inside the city, an old nurse murmurs a prophecy. Every tear tonight buys a ghost tomorrow. By the time dawn returns, you can still see the faint drag marks in the dust outside the Greek camp, a reminder that glory, when you strip it down, often looks a lot like ruin. The next dawn creeps over the plain like a guilty secret, pale and hesitant. The Greeks stir in their tents, whispering about what they've seen. Even they can't quite celebrate the victory. There's something heavy in the air, like the silence that follows a scream. You wander toward the center of camp, where Achilles sits beside the pyre of Patroclus. His armor still glints, but his face is shadowed. Around him lie heaps of spoils stripped from Hector, his sword, his belt, the bronze crest that once shone like sunlight over Troy. Achilles has claimed them all, but the satisfaction is hollow. He hasn't slept. You can see it in the way he stares at the horizon, as though expecting Patroclus to come walking out of the sea foam any minute. He rises slowly, the way a mountain might shift if it decided to move. It's time, he says, voice low, almost to himself. The Greeks begin building the funeral pyre for Patroclus, a towering structure of cedar, pine, and fragrant herbs. You can smell the resin even from a distance, sweet and sharp, filling your lungs until you almost feel lightheaded. This is where the grief becomes ritual. Achilles commands that the locks of hair from every soldier who fought alongside Patroclus be cut and thrown into the flames. You feel the weight of your own hair in your hands, heavy, real human. When it falls into the fire, the smoke seems to carry something of your soul with it. As the pyre burns, Achilles walks around it 3 times, pouring libations of honey and oil. He whispers something each time, maybe a prayer, maybe an apology. Then comes the darker part. Achilles orders 12 Trojan captives, young, trembling, faces smeared with dust, to be brought forward. He doesn't speak as he raises his blade. One by one, their lives end, offered as tribute to his fallen friend. The Greeks avert their eyes. You do too. Historians still argue whether this act was an invention of later poets to show Achilles' descent into barbarity or a reflection of genuine Bronze Age funerary rites. Either way, it's a grim mirror of how devotion can mutate into destruction. By the time the fire dies down, the air shimmers with heat. The ashes are gathered carefully, mixed with wine, and sealed in a golden urn. Achilles places it beside his tent, promising aloud, "When I die, our ashes will rest together." It's one of those lines you know he means literally, and soon. As night falls again, the camp quiets. But Achilles doesn't rest. He goes to where Hector's body still lies beside the chariot, untouched by decay, the god's quiet protest against his rage. Achilles stares for a long time, then ties the corpse to the chariot once more and drags it around Patroclus' tomb, circling it 3 times before dawn. The sound of the grinding wheels echoes across the plain. Even in Troy, the mourners can hear it. But high on Olympus, the gods have had enough. Apollo, who once favored Hector, pleads for his release. "He's dead, Achilles. Show mercy." Zeus nods. This cruelty must end. He sends Iris, his messenger, down in a blaze of color to fetch Thetis. You imagine her rising from the sea, foam clinging to her like lace, as Iris tells her the command. She sighs, that deep, oceanic sound of mothers who already know what comes next. "Go to him," Zeus says. "Tell him to ransom the body back." Meanwhile, inside Troy's walls, the grief has hollowed the people. Priam sits on the steps of his palace, head bowed, a man made small by sorrow. He hasn't spoken since Hector's death, until a dream comes. Hermes, god of travelers and boundaries, appears, shining faintly in the dark. "Old king," he says, "Zeus commands you to go to the Greek camp. Bring rich gifts. Beg for your son's body. Achilles will listen." Imagine that, the frailest man in Troy walking into the enemy's camp, unarmed, guided by a god invisible to all but him. When Priam wakes, his resolve is set. He gathers gold, silver, fine robes, and a priceless cup, once used by the gods themselves. Then, against every plea from his counselors, he climbs into his chariot. You go with him. It feels wrong, this quiet journey through a landscape of corpses and broken spears. The air hums with the ghosts of yesterday. Hermes leads the way, unseen by sentries. He even puts the guards to sleep, their helmets glinting under starlight. When the chariot stops outside Achilles' tent, you can hear the rhythmic hiss of the waves nearby and the low crackle of dying campfires. Priam steps down, trembling. Inside, Achilles sits alone. He's just finished his meal and stares absently at the food, as though unsure what to do with it. The flicker of the fire catches the gold in his hair. Then the flap of the tent opens, and Priam kneels before him. No preamble, no ceremony, just an old man dropping to his knees in front of the man who killed his son. "You've taken him from me," Priam says, voice shaking. "But I come not as a king. I come as a father. Remember your own." The words slice through the air, sharper than any blade. Achilles freezes. For the first time in what feels like forever, you see something break open behind his eyes. He reaches out, touches Priam's shoulder. "You remind me of him," he whispers. "Of my father. Sit, old man. Eat with me." And just like that, the war pauses. 2 men, one young and burning, one ancient and fading, share bread in the middle of a battlefield. You'd think it impossible, but mercy has a strange way of sneaking in when everyone's too tired to fight anymore. The tent is dim, lit only by the fire's faint pulse. You can hear the surf outside, a soft whispering rhythm that seems to sync with the breathing of both men. Achilles sits across from Priam, his hands trembling ever so slightly as he passes bread across the table. For the first time in weeks, he's gentle. The rage that burned like wildfire has cooled into embers. Priam accepts the food, his fingers thin and worn. You have a father too, he says softly. Think of him, far away, waiting for word of you. Achilles looks away, eyes glistening with something you'd forgotten he was capable of grief. Yes, he murmurs, Peleus. He's waiting, and I will never see him again. His voice falters. I took a god's choice over a long life, and now it feels like all I have left are ghosts. You can feel the entire tent holding its breath, as if the universe itself has paused to listen. The two men eat in silence for a while. The fire crackles, the sea sighs. There's something almost sacred about it. The most powerful warrior and the most broken king sharing a meal neither of them can taste. Then Priam leans forward. Please, he whispers, let me see him. Achilles nods. He rises, disappears for a moment, and returns with Hector's body, freshly washed and wrapped in linen. You notice, though Achilles doesn't mention it, that the wounds are gone. Not healed exactly, but erased. The gods have preserved Hector's dignity even in death. Achilles kneels, placing the body gently before the old king. He's as beautiful as the day he left you, he says quietly. Priam covers his face, sobbing, not loudly, but in that raw, exhausted way that comes from running out of everything else. Achilles turns his head, blinking fast, and for a long time neither man moves. Finally, Achilles speaks, voice low as if afraid to break the moment. You'll have 12 days to bury him. No Greek will raise a sword. After that, he trails off, unable to finish. After that, Priam says softly, we'll see what gods decide. Outside, Hermes waits in the darkness, invisible to all but you. He smiles faintly, pleased, because his part in this strange piece is almost done. Achilles orders a bed prepared for the king, insists he sleeps safely in his tent for the night. You've journeyed far enough, he says. Even heroes need rest. It's almost funny, Achilles, who hasn't slept properly in weeks, telling someone else to rest. You can hear him chuckle softly at the irony as Priam drifts off beside the fire. That night, Achilles dreams of home, not of glory or battle, but of a quiet shore where his father's hands, rough and sure, build nets by the sea. The smell of salt and olive wood fills the air. Somewhere nearby, a boy himself, long ago, laughs, running barefoot through the surf. When he wakes, dawn has already spilled across the horizon. Priam is gone, escorted safely back to Troy with Hector's body. The camp feels strangely still, the myrmidons moving softly as though not to disturb something fragile. You walk beside Achilles as he steps outside his tent. For the first time, you realize how thin he looks, how much the rage is taken from him. He watches the smoke rising in the distance, the smoke of Hector's funeral pyre. There's no triumph in his face, only acceptance. Strange, he says after a while. I killed him, but it feels like I killed part of myself. You almost say something comforting, but he beats you to it. Don't worry, he adds with a wry half-smile. I'm used to it. Heroes spend their lives dying in pieces. He's not wrong. Historians still argue whether Homer meant this scene as redemption or resignation. Some claim Achilles' kindness proves he regains his humanity before death. Others think it's just exhaustion, his anger burned out, leaving only the ashes of regret. Maybe both. Maybe neither. As the sun climbs higher, the Greek camp begins preparing for battle again. The truce is temporary, everyone knows that. But for now, even soldiers give space for mourning. You can hear the faint echo of Troy's dirges floating across the plain, a song so sad it feels older than language itself. Achilles stands motionless, listening. They sing better than we do, he says softly. Then, almost absent-mindedly, he picks up his spear and walks toward the shore. His immortal horses follow. They seem restless, like they know the story's last act is already written. By midday, the funeral smoke fades, replaced by the smell of salt and iron. Achilles gazes across the water, toward where the horizon meets the clouds. There's peace out there somewhere, he murmurs, but not for me. You want to ask him what he means, but he turns, a strange calm in his eyes. I made my choice long ago. Glory doesn't come cheap. It just costs more than I thought. A curious little legend drifts through your mind. That Achilles once told Thetis he dreamed of two possible lives, one long and forgettable, the other short but sung forever. Maybe deep down, he hoped he'd wake up and find both were wrong, that he'd live long and be remembered. But fate doesn't do discounts. He dips his hand into the sea, lets the water run through his fingers, and smiles faintly. It's colder than I remember. That night, as the Greek camp quiets once more, the sky turns deep violet. You can feel something shifting in the air, subtle but final. The war isn't done, but Achilles' part in it is nearly over. And somewhere far above, Apollo is already watching, his bow strung tight, waiting for the perfect moment to draw. The next morning carries a stillness that feels unnatural, like the sea holding its breath before a storm. You can almost sense it, the threads of fate tightening, drawing Achilles closer to the inevitable. The Greek camp stirs slowly, unaware that its brightest light is about to burn out. Achilles walks among his men, lighter somehow, as though the rage that once crushed him has finally exhaled. He laughs easily for the first time in weeks, even teases a soldier about his crooked helmet. For a fleeting moment, he looks human again. But if the gods have taught you anything by now, it's that peace is always the prelude to punishment. Out on the plain, Apollo watches from above, his golden bow slung over one shoulder, his expression unreadable. He hasn't forgotten Hector, or the desecration. Let the mortal feel what he's made others feel. The god mutters, and the wind carries his words straight into the heart of Troy. The war resumes like a wound reopening. You follow Achilles as he leads the Greeks once more into battle. The sun blazes down on the bronze shields until it's almost impossible to look at them. The air smells of dust, sweat, and the faint tang of fear. But Achilles, he's unstoppable. Even without Hector to fight, his spear finds its rhythm again. You see him sweep through the Trojan ranks like wildfire through dry grass. No hesitation, no mercy, just that haunting precision that makes it seem like he's dancing with death, not defying it. And yet, something's different. The way he moves, it's a touch slower, a heartbeat off. You can tell he feels it too. The faint tug of destiny pressing on his heel like an invisible hand. Historians still argue whether Achilles' heel myth was part of the original Greek tales or a later Roman addition. Homer never mentions a vulnerable spot. Only that fate, not anatomy, brings him down. Still, the image stuck. A hero undone by the one place untouched by divine protection. Maybe it's poetic justice, or maybe it's just a reminder that no armor, no matter how glorious, can cover everything. The Trojans fight fiercely, but morale cracks without Hector. Their lines buckle. Even Aeneas, that future founder of Rome, has to be pulled away from Achilles' spear by the direct intervention of Poseidon himself. You can almost hear the gods muttering among themselves. He's gone too far again. And then the arrow. It happens so fast you almost miss it. Achilles is chasing the Trojans toward the Scaean gate, victory already blazing in his mind, when Apollo, disguised as Paris, lifts a bow on the walls. The god steadies his aim, whispering to the mortal prince, "Now." The arrow flies, a shimmer in the air, a sound like breath cutting short. You see Achilles stagger mid-stride, confusion flashing across his face. He looks down and finds the shaft buried deep near his ankle, the one place Thetis never dipped when she made him near-immortal. The moment stretches impossibly long. Then he falls. The sound of his body hitting the ground is softer than you'd expect, just a dull thud, swallowed by the roar of battle. For a few seconds, no one moves. Even the Trojans freeze, as if trying to decide whether to believe what they've just seen. Then chaos erupts. The Greeks rush forward, forming a ring around their fallen hero. You dive with them, dust choking your throat. Achilles tries to stand, but the wound burns like ice. "Apollo," he gasps. It was Apollo. His voice cracks. "Coward god." Patroclus is long gone, but Achilles still talks to him, as though his spirit might be hovering nearby. "Looks like I'm coming after you sooner than I thought." You can see the color draining from his face, the brightness dimming. He grips your arm suddenly, strength still like iron. "Tell them," he says, "to bury me with him. Same urn." Promise. You nod, though your throat won't let you speak. A strange calm settles over the battlefield. Even the enemy lowers their weapons. It's as if both sides understand they're watching the end of something larger than war, a legend closing its eyes. In the distance, the gods begin to withdraw. Athena turns away, her armor flickering into mist. Poseidon sinks beneath the waves. Even Apollo looks regretful for a heartbeat before disappearing into sunlight. Only Thetis remains. She rises from the sea, her form half shadow, half foam, and kneels beside her dying son. You knew it would come, she whispers. Achilles tries to smile. I did. She presses a hand to his cheek. Then sleep, my bright one. His eyes close. The breath leaves him in a sigh so soft you almost don't catch it. And just like that, the most invincible man in Greece becomes only human again. It's said that when he died, the air changed, that the sea grew quiet, that dolphins surfaced to mourn him, that even the winds stalled in disbelief. Some poets swore his body glowed faintly as though the divine light inside him refused to go out completely. The Myrmidons carry him back to camp in silence. The whole army follows, heads bowed. The war, for all its noise and fury, suddenly feels meaningless. You walk beside the bier, and for once, the second-person narration doesn't feel like distance. It feels like loss. Because you've been there for every wound, every foolish decision, every spark of glory. You know what he was. Not just a warrior, but a mirror of what humans do when they chase perfection at the cost of peace. That night, as the fires burn low, Odysseus orders guards to keep watch. But no one sleeps. Somewhere, the sea whispers Thetis' lament, a melody too soft for words, too heavy for comfort. And in Troy, Priam stands at his wall again, staring at the Greek camp. He doesn't smile, but he nods once, as though acknowledging the strange symmetry of it all. You sit by the shore, staring at the stars. One flickers brighter than the rest. Maybe it's nothing, or maybe it's Achilles, finally at ease. Days pass in a haze of smoke and silence. The Greek camp, once alive with shouts and the clang of bronze, now moves like a ghost settlement. Even the sea seems to mourn, lapping quietly at the shore where Achilles' body lies in state. You walk among the Myrmidons. Their faces are hollowed out by grief and disbelief. These were men who followed Achilles through fire, who believed he could not die. Now they polish his armor in silence, laying each piece beside him as if returning sacred relics to an altar. The once golden plates are dented, the red horsehair crest dark with dust and blood. Odysseus oversees preparations for the funeral. His voice, usually sharp and pragmatic, carries an edge of reverence now. We'll honor him as we do the gods, he says simply. And for once, no one argues. The pyre they build for Achilles rises taller than a fortress. Timber from ships, chests of oil, gold ornaments, the finest cloaks, all piled high. It gleams in the morning light, like a mountain of fire, waiting for breath. Around its base, the Greeks place jars of honey, amphorae of wine, and the weapons of fallen comrades. Then comes the urn, the one Achilles demanded to share with Patroclus. You can feel the weight of that promise as they lay it beside the bier. Two souls, inseparable even in death. When Thetis appears again, the sea follows her. Waves foam at the edge of the shore, and a mist rises, cool and fragrant. She moves through the soldiers like wind through grass, untouchable, luminous, ancient. In her arms, she carries a new suit of armor, forged by Hephaestus himself. But this one isn't meant for battle, it's meant for eternity. She places it gently over Achilles' body, whispering something too soft to hear. Maybe it's a mother's prayer. Maybe it's an apology. The torches are lit. The fire catches quickly, roaring up in a column of gold and red. The heat forces you back, but no one turns away. The air smells of salt, smoke, and cedar. Sparks rise into the sky like souls escaping gravity. From Troy, they can see the flames. Priam knows what they mean. He gathers his robe tighter, bowing his head. So falls the last great one, he murmurs. Even the enemy king can't help but grieve the man who made war into legend. The funeral games begin the next day. Chariot races, wrestling, archery, foot races, all meant to honor Achilles' spirit. You can almost hear his laughter echoing among them, the way he used to shout encouragements and insults in equal measure. But the mood has changed. Even victory feels muted. The heroes who remain, Odysseus, Diomedes, Ajax, move like men carrying invisible chains. You can see the question in their eyes. If he could fall, what chance do the rest of us have? And still, the war isn't over. The walls of Troy stand. The prophecy remains. When night falls, a small figure makes his way into the Greek camp, covered in dust. It's Priam, king of Troy, aged, unarmed, unguarded. You watch him walk straight into Achilles' tent, where the ashes still glow faintly in their urn. The guards almost stop him, but Odysseus gestures them aside. "Let him pass," he says. "This is for the gods to witness." Inside, Priam kneels before the urn. His voice trembles, but his words are steady. "Son of Thetis," he says, "I came once to beg for my own child's body, and you granted it. Now I come to honor you too. For though you were my enemy, you were also the greatest of men." He removes his crown and sets it beside the ashes. "Let there be no kings tonight," he whispers. You feel something shift in the air, grief folding into respect, hatred into history. When Priam leaves, he looks older than before but strangely lighter, as though a burden has been lifted. Odysseus watches him go and mutters, "The gods toy with us, but even they must weep tonight." Later, Thetis returns one last time. She takes the urn in her hands and carries it to the edge of the sea. The waves part as she steps in. For a moment, she turns back toward the shore, her eyes glistening with moonlight. Then she's gone, vanishing beneath the water with her son and his dearest friend. The war will rage on. The Greeks will find new cunning ways to end it. The wooden horse, the fire, the ruin. But none of it will shine as brightly as Achilles' brief blaze. You stand on the empty beach. Dawn lights soft on the water. Somewhere in the distance, a gull cries, echoing like a lament. And for the first time since the story began, there is peace. The Iliad ends not with victory, but with funerals, with mercy, with the quiet understanding that even the greatest must fall, and that perhaps, in falling, they return to the gods who lent them their light. You breathe out slowly. You've walked through rage, through beauty, through the tragedy of a man too perfect for the world that made him. Now, all that's left is the silence after the psalm. You linger in the aftermath. The Trojan dust has not yet settled, but already the air feels heavier, as though the world itself needs time to understand what has happened. Hector is dead, and you stand beside Achilles as he drags the body around the walls of Troy, again and again, until the chariot wheels are slick with dust and disbelief. The Trojans watch from their ramparts, silent and pale. Priam, gray and trembling, clutches the stone of the gate, whispering his son's name. The women wail softly, the sound drifting down like a lament carried on wind. But Achilles cannot hear them. His eyes are glass, reflecting only the broken horizon and his own reflection in the polished armor he once lent to a friend who never came back. This is not victory, it's punishment, the price of glory. The gods look on, and even they begin to frown. Apollo, the bright archer, turns away first. "Enough," he mutters, "even for him." And somewhere in the high clouds, Zeus nods slowly, his thunder quiet for once. Historians still argue whether this moment marked Achilles' redemption or his final descent, but in the soft hush between heartbeat and regret, you sense it's both. When the body is finally dragged into the camp, the Myrmidons avert their eyes. They followed their captain through every slaughter, yet even they seem uneasy now. You can almost hear what they're thinking, that something sacred has been broken, something that once held the line between hero and monster. At night, Achilles sits alone by the fire. The flames dance across his face, catching the lines carved there by grief and rage. You can smell the salt of the sea, still clinging to his skin, a reminder of the mother who can't save him anymore. He holds a goblet of wine, but doesn't drink. Instead, he talks softly to the darkness, to the ghost of Patroclus, to the memory of what he was before this war stripped him bare. "Did I avenge you, brother?" he whispers. "Or did I just join you?" The wind answers only with the crackle of the pyre wood. Then, one night, something strange happens. A figure glides through the camp, moving with the hesitant grace of old bones. It's Priam, the king of Troy, father of Hector, come alone, unarmed and unguarded. You can almost feel the tension in the air as he passes through the sleeping Greeks, guided by Hermes himself. He enters Achilles' tent and kneels at his feet. The gesture is so quiet, so unthinkable, that even the gods hold their breath. Priam reaches for Achilles' hands, the same hands that killed his son, and presses them to his forehead. "Remember your father," he says softly. "Remember how he loves you, how he will never see you again. I have done what no father should have to do. I have kissed the hand that took my child. Now give him back to me." The words hang in the air like a blade. Achilles stares at the old man, and for a long moment, nothing moves. Then, something inside him cracks, the iron shell of his grief, splitting at last. He sees not a king, not an enemy, but father. And through that mirror, he sees his own fate reflected back. He reaches out, trembling, and helps Priam to his feet. The two men sit together through the night, saying little. There are no speeches, no gods, no glory left, just a shared understanding that pain is the one thing that outlives even heroes. When morning comes, Achilles gives Hector's body back. He orders it washed, anointed, and wrapped in fine linen. You stand beside him as he watches Priam's servants carry it toward Troy. His voice, when he finally speaks, is almost tender. "Your son fought well," he says. "No man could ask for more." The Trojans hold their funeral rites beneath a sky that seems newly fragile. Smoke rises once more, mingling with the ashes of yesterday's fire. And in that smoke, for just a flicker, you think you see the shapes of two friends standing side by side, Patroclus and Hector, waiting for the man who will soon join them. Because fate hasn't finished with Achilles. You can feel it tightening around him, invisible and patient. Somewhere beyond the plain, Apollo is already stringing his bow, and Paris, yes, Paris, waits with trembling hands and an arrow that will change everything. But for now, just for this breath, there's peace. Achilles sits in the morning light, the rage gone from his face, replaced by something quieter. Maybe sorrow, maybe acceptance. He closes his eyes. The wind moves through his hair, carrying the scent of olive wood and salt. Somewhere far off, the waves lap gently at the shore. You almost believe that if he could stay still long enough, the gods might forget him. The dawn that follows feels like the first calm in a decade. The sea breathes quietly against the sand, and for the first time in years, Achilles doesn't wake to the clang of bronze or the scent of smoke. You can almost imagine him as he once was, a man before the myth, just sitting there with the sunrise bleeding gold across his armor. Priam has returned to Troy with Hector's body. The mourning there lasts 9 days, their fires burning without pause, the city's towers veiled in black. Even the wind seems to move slower, as if it carries grief in every sigh. In the Greek camp, the silence is heavier than any victory. Men avoid Achilles' eyes, unsure whether he's still the same after that strange night when he gave mercy to a king. You watch him move through the camp now, still towering, still radiant, but quieter, almost haunted. It's as if rage has been drained from him, leaving only exhaustion. That night, as the stars gather above the plain, Achilles walks to the edge of the water. You follow from a distance. The moon glints on the waves like scattered coins. Somewhere beneath them, Thetis is waiting. When she rises, she does not come with thunder or foam this time. She comes like a memory, soft, silver, and sad. "My son," she says, voice trembling with the tide. "You've done all the things the fates wrote for you. You have avenged your friend, ended the rage that consumed you. But your end, too, is close." Achilles doesn't flinch. He looks at her with the same strange calm he gave Priam. "I know," he says simply. "I hear it in the quiet." Thetis reaches out, fingers brushing his cheek. "I tried to save you," she whispers. "I dipped you in the river, begged the gods, hid you among women, and still they found you." He smiles faintly. "Maybe that's what makes us mortal, mother. We're always found." You feel the ocean itself pause, as if even the waves want to remember this moment. Historians still argue whether this scene ever appeared in the earliest poems or was added by later storytellers, but one thing is certain. It feels like truth, the kind that slips between words. The next day, Achilles calls the Greek leaders together. He speaks little, only enough to arrange Patroclus's tomb, his own burial mound beside it, and the games that will follow his death. His men listen without question. They've learned not to argue with prophecy. For a brief stretch of days, the war recedes. The Greeks mend their ships, the Trojans mend their walls, and between them lies a fragile peace made of exhaustion and ash. Achilles watches it all like a man standing outside of time. But peace never lasts long here. The gods stir again, restless. Apollo still seethes for Hector, whose death he sees as his own failure. He was mine, the sun god mutters to himself. That mortal had no right. So he plans the end of Achilles, not with thunder, but with precision. He finds Paris on Troy's high wall, the once glamorous prince now gaunt with guilt and shame. Your arrow, Apollo whispers, can still redeem you. Paris shakes his head. I'm no warrior. You don't need to be, the god says, placing his bright hand over the prince's. Just aim where I tell you. You can feel the chill of destiny again, the way it creeps in softly, almost kindly, before it strikes. Achilles stands by his ships, the air shimmering with heat, his new armor gleaming like a second sun. He doesn't know yet that the bow is being strung. And here's a curious little fact. In later myths, it's said that Achilles' heel wasn't just an accident. It was the part of him his mother held when she dipped him into the Styx, the one spot the river didn't touch. Some scholars think that detail was added centuries later to explain the unexplainable. How someone nearly divine could die from something so small. But whether you believe that or not, you can't help feeling the irony of it. The strongest man in the world undone by the smallest weakness. There's poetry in that. There's humanity. As the sun dips low and shadows stretch across the plain, Achilles feels a strange peace wash over him. Maybe it's memory, or fatigue, or something deeper. He glances toward the city he's fought so long to destroy, and almost smiles. It's beautiful at sunset, he murmurs. Then the arrow flies. You don't even hear it. Just a whisper through air, a flicker of gold. It strikes his heel. He stumbles, eyes wide in disbelief. For a heartbeat, he seems immortal again, refusing to fall. But even gods in borrowed flesh must yield. He sinks slowly to his knees, the sand darkening beneath him. The Myrmidons rush forward. Odysseus shouts his name. Thetis rises from the sea with a cry that splits the wind. And as you watch him fall, you understand. The prophecy wasn't cruelty. It was completion. He lived as only legends can. Too bright, too brief. The sun dips lower. The waves hush. And Achilles, child of sea and storm, hero of 1,000 songs, breathes out one final time. The world holds its breath. The camp goes silent. Not a soldier speaks. Not a bird dares to call. Even the wind seems to hold its breath. You stand beside Achilles' fallen body, the golden armor dulled by dust and blood, the sand darkened where his heel met destiny. The Myrmidons kneel, some with heads bowed, some with fists pressed into the earth, as if trying to draw the strength back into the soil. Thetis rises from the waves, foamy and radiant, moving toward her son. Her hands tremble as she brushes the sand from his armor, her voice a soft lament that carries like the last tide retreating from shore. My bright one, she whispers, you were always too fierce for this world. She cradles him, the sea curling around her ankles like protective fingers. You can feel the salt on your lips, the faint hum of the ocean, and the deep, aching absence left by his breath. The Myrmidons do not touch him. Even they sense the sacred space Thetis creates. Historians still debate whether Achilles' death was originally by Paris' hand, or if later poets added Apollo's guidance to highlight the role of fate. Either way, the story isn't about who fired the arrow. It's about inevitability. The invincible man, undone by his one overlooked vulnerability, becomes a lesson in mortality that even the gods cannot erase. The Greeks prepare his funeral pyre, timber stacked like a small fortress, golden trinkets from conquered kings, amphorae filled with wine, and weapons from countless battles form a mountain around him. The air smells of cedar and smoke, and something more subtle, the scent of endings. You help the soldiers arrange the pyre, feeling the surreal finality of each placement. Odysseus gives the order for a quiet watch. "No man leaves," he says. "We honor him as though he were a god among us." The fire is lit at dusk. Sparks leap like small stars, and for a moment, the world seems to pause. You notice how the flames illuminate the Myrmidons' faces, hollowed with grief, yet softened by reverence. Somewhere behind the smoke, the gods watch silently, some regretful, some satisfied, all aware that this is a moment that will echo through eternity. The funeral games begin the next day. Chariot races, wrestling, archery, and foot races. The Greek soldiers compete not for glory, but to honor the man who led them through impossibilities. You watch the smallest gestures, the playful shove, the sly grin, the softening of eyes mid-competition, and see how even in death, Achilles' spirit shapes them. Meanwhile, in Troy, Priam conducts Hector's burial rites. He watches the pyre smoke drifting over the walls, and you imagine he feels a strange kinship with the Greeks who are mourning too. Death has drawn strange lines of empathy across the battlefield. That night, you walk the shore with the lingering echo of the waves. The air hums quietly, the stars above burn faintly, and the world feels both emptier and more sacred. You can almost hear Thetis singing to her son, a lullaby of the sea, soft enough to reach only the gods and you. Somewhere, the wind carries the faint echo of the first battle cries, the ones Achilles answered as a boy. You can feel his presence lingering in the sand, in the salt, in the quiet hum of survival and loss. The sun sets slowly, painting the horizon gold and violet, as if the world itself honors the life that just ended. The next morning feels unreal, as if the sun itself hesitates before lighting the battlefield again. You wander through the Greek camp, now filled with a quiet that borders on reverence. The tents flap gently in the breeze, but there is no shouting, no clanging of bronze, no boasting. Even the horses move with subdued grace, sensing the absence of the one who led them through glory and ruin. Odysseus and the remaining leaders gather near Achilles' pyre. They speak in hushed tones, arranging the urns, the ashes, and the treasures heaped atop the mound. You can hear the faint sizzle of fire in the distance, the last embers of the funeral pyre, smoking into the morning. It feels surreal. This man who shook nations is now only a memory, tangible only in flame and bronze. The Myrmidons perform rituals as best as they can, cutting small locks of hair and tossing them into the wind. Some hum softly, others weep quietly. You notice the youngest soldiers, the ones who barely remember the sound of laughter before war, trying to memorize every detail of Achilles' presence. The tilt of his helmet, the flick of his spear, the way his armor caught the sunlight. You follow them out to the shore, where Thetis once appeared. She has retreated into the waves, leaving only a faint shimmer on the surface, a reminder that even gods must sometimes let mortals grieve alone. And yet, the water seems to carry her blessing, gentle and constant, washing over the soldiers' feet, as if urging them to move forward. Priam, far away in Troy, continues to mourn Hector. You imagine him gazing at the distant smoke, knowing that the wars he's lost cannot undo the weight of fathers and sons, kings and warriors, lives entwined with loss. He understands, perhaps better than anyone, the futility and poetry of grief. Historians still argue whether Homer intended Priam's visit to symbolize universal compassion or just the arbitrary mercy of fate. Either way, it remains a poignant moment, a bridge between two cultures and two tragedies. The Greek camp begins to stir cautiously, the faint hum of activity returning. Some men practice with spears and shields, though without zeal. Others prepare to sail, glancing back at the pyre as if trying to memorize every flicker of smoke. You watch Achilles' ghostly imprint in the sand, the subtle curve of his footprints leading toward the horizon, proof that even in death, he leaves a mark. The air carries the scent of cedar, salt, and faint smoke. You inhale deeply, feeling the enormity of history in your chest. This is not the roar of battle. It is the hush of memory, the quiet that comes after someone larger than life has fallen. And somewhere, beyond the walls of Troy, you can hear the faint whisper of the future, of the stories that will be sung, the art that will be inspired, the poets who will rise to retell the tale. Achilles has become immortal not in flesh, but in the way humans remember. You lie down on the shore, the sand cool beneath you, listening to the soft lap of waves. The sky is vast, quiet, and infinite. For the camp is quiet now, eerily so. The last echo of the funeral songs fades into the dark horizon, and you realize that what remains isn't war anymore, but aftermath. Smoke drifts lazily from the pyre's ashes, rising like sighs toward a sky that's already begun to forget the fire beneath it. You wander the shoreline, bare feet sinking into damp sand still warm from the flames. The water moves with the gentlest rhythm, brushing away footprints before they can settle. For the first time in this long story, you feel the weight of stillness. No clashing bronze, no cries of triumph, no trembling prophecies. Just the hush that follows an ending. You think of Achilles, not as the warrior who defied kings or killed princes, but as a boy whose mother tried to cheat fate. A boy who wanted to live forever in song, and who somehow did. Historians still argue whether Achilles was ever real at all, or whether he's the echo of many soldiers, fused into one blazing myth. Maybe both are true. Myths have a way of swallowing facts and breathing them back as symbols. You picture the poets centuries later, sitting beside their fires, retelling the story again and again. Each one adds a new glint to the armor, a new layer of sorrow to the voice. By the time Homer sings, Achilles isn't flesh and bone anymore. He's become the very shape of rage and glory, a mirror held up to every soldier who ever asked if honor was worth dying for. And yet even heroes fade. Troy becomes dust. The Greeks sail home to empty kingdoms. The names of kings, Agamemnon, Menelaus, Ajax, blur into old syllables. But Achilles stays. You can hear him in the heartbeat of every legend that came after. Alexander the Great carried a copy of the Iliad wherever he marched. When Roman poets wrote of glory, they borrowed his fury, his fire, his flaw. It's strange, isn't it, that we remember the man who died young more than those who lived long. Maybe that's the point. Maybe immortality doesn't come from surviving, but from mattering. You sit down on the sand. The stars above are old, older than any of this. You imagine one of them as Achilles, burning still, untouchable by the slow decay of centuries. The breeze carries salt and the faint hum of waves, like breath against your ear. And you think about how every generation remakes him. Painters, sculptors, storytellers, they keep dragging him from the underworld, dressing him in new words, new wounds. He's never quite the same, but he never really disappears. Some scholars think that's the real magic of myth. Not that it happened once, but that it keeps happening. Every time you tell it, it becomes true again. You can feel that truth now, quiet and ancient, curling through your thoughts like smoke from a dying fire. You imagine yourself standing beside Thetis at the edge of the sea, the urn in her hands. The horizon glows faintly, dawn just beginning to stretch across the water. She lowers her sun into the deep, and for a heartbeat, everything stops, the waves, the wind, even the sun seems to hesitate. Then the sea exhales, and the world begins again. Achilles sleeps, but his story doesn't. It ripples outward, through history, through language, through the simple act of remembering. You were there for his birth, his pride, his fall. You saw the fire and the river and the endless gray of war. And now you're here for the quiet, the part that lasts longest. You close your eyes. The air hums softly, the ocean a lullaby. The voice that's been guiding you all this way grows slower, gentler, each word stretching just a little longer than the last. So take a deep breath. Let the noise of battle fall away. Let the armor and the spears and the fire drift from your thoughts. There's only the rhythm of waves, the whisper of wind against your skin, the steady pulse of your own heart. Maybe Achilles is out there still, racing across some endless field, his laughter carried by the tide. Maybe he's finally resting, his name cradled by the ocean that bore him. Either way, his legend has found a home, in the minds that remember him, in nights like this one, when old stories soften into dreams. The stars tilt overhead. The sea sighs again, long and low. Everything slows. Everything fades. You lie back on the shore of myth and close your eyes. The world grows quiet. The fire goes out. The story sleeps.